So, we're doing this again? Ah, another movie with Rey as a main character, and this is the first thing the director has to say. Just great. It's amazing how the one thing you should not do when trying to entice a hugely skeptical fan base into a Rey movie is framing it with 2016 identity politics, and it's essentially the first thing they've done. It's almost like they have a manual on what not to do when trying to win over a fan base that doesn't initially care anymore. Star Wars is one of my all-time favorites, but after Disney bought it, I feel like it went downhill from there. Sure, The Mandalorian threw us a bone, but let's face it, the rest has been a parade of questionable decisions. It's like watching someone fumble an easy putt after an impressive drive. Would love to see the franchise in better hands, but we all know how that plays out in the grand scheme of things. As a kid, I reveled in the magic of Star Wars. But these days, it's as if the storytellers are blindfolded and playing pin the tail on the plotline. They're churning out content for the sake of it, chanting the mantra of product without a care for what made us fall in love with this franchise in the first place. They don't care about good stories, they just want you in the seats while they bank off your nostalgia for the original. Remember when this franchise series gracefully bowed out and nerds were happy and satisfied before it was turned into an annoying franchise overstaying its welcome? Ah, those were the days. Today, people don't even know why they are Star Wars fans anymore. The Star Wars fandom is left scratching its head, wondering why they're still clinging to this intergalactic roller coaster. It's like being in a long-term relationship without knowing why you're together. Are we fans because it's Star Wars? Or are we just victims of a lingering nostalgia trip? And of course, that's starting to fade now, because we have nothing to latch onto except maybe Baby Yoda is cute, which he's not. Sure, he's got those big eyes, but let's not forget, the little scamp scumbag ate a sentient creature's eggs, and all the fans collectively cooed like it was the most adorable thing they'd ever seen. It was as if he's just performed the galaxy's cutest magic trick. Star Wars, or whatever remains of that once glorious franchise, is like a zombie that just won't quit. They keep churning out this dumpster fire of content that nobody asked for or even wants. The individual movies are like a series of unfortunate events, steaming dumpster fires, each one worse than the last. You cannot convince me that the last movie was not only making fun of its fans but spitting right in their eyes. I used to be a defender, a loyal soldier in the Star Wars army for decades. But that last trip to the theater changed everything. It wasn't just a movie, it was a betrayal. A middle finger aimed directly at the people who kept the Galaxy franchise flame alive. Now, I'm at a stage where I am somewhere between apathy and contempt, but can't figure out exactly what it is. On one hand, the Star Wars is nothing to me now. I feel absolutely nothing towards it. No hate, no love, nothing. Star Wars, once the epicenter of my universe, now occupies the same mental shelf as some forgettable action flick from a decade ago. It's like trying to remember the name of that B-list actor you saw in a forgettable summer blockbuster. Not worth the mental effort. Sure, I'll proudly call myself a Star Wars fan, but don't you dare attach that Disney label to it. The real deal started in '77 and concluded in the 2010s when Lucas sold and handed over the keys to this company. Everything since then is just a sad attempt to recapture the magic, and we all know how that story ends. The cinematic and economic climate over the last few years has really shown that people are not willing to spend a ton of money in the cinema on movies with lackluster characters. It's not fatigue, it's just a refusal to shell out cash for cinematic disasters. It's incredible to me that Disney has been so poor at reading the room, and they are going to dump a huge amount of money into this, especially after the Marvel's debacle. The thing that really kind of blows my mind is if this devise and woke madness was actually working, I wouldn't really even be able to criticize Disney for it. If Disney said, hey, if we reach out to another demographic, we can pull them in and make even more money, and then started doing everything they've been doing, and the Marvel movies kept rolling $800 million to $1 billion every time, and Star Wars was as popular as it's ever been, I could at least say, hey, this isn't for me, but it's still doing well. But that's not what's happening. Disney lost billions, and yet they double down, as if they look at the money lost as an investment to educate people and not to entertain them. It's like they have this burning desire to light a mountain of cash ablaze. This next film is going to be what the South Park Pandaverse special tried to warn us about. At this stage, it's either extreme stubbornness in sticking to their agenda or extreme stupidity for sticking with it despite all the criticism and the terrible box office performances. There's really no other explanation, but whatever it is, it's leading Disney down the path of financial destruction. In the good old days, studios aimed to please audiences. Flops and failures were seen as signals to pivot. But now it's taken personal, and the response is to take it out on the customers. The sooner this whole chapter of Disney and Hollywood burns to the ground, the better. These days, it seems like Hollywood's rising talents have an easy playbook. Just echo the right ideology, and you've got a golden ticket to any director's chair or writing desk. It's like the suits upstairs are handing out jobs to anyone who can parrot the approved narrative. They look at these CEOs and execs and think, well, all I have to do is to say the right words in line with a specific ideology, and I can get whatever job I want. Putting these talentless hacks in positions of authority and inspiration has profound repercussions in the industry. Disney isn't just murdering Star Wars or the MCU Marvel or Indiana Jones. They are murdering the whole craft of writing and directing blockbuster movies as a whole. It's no longer about creating a moving story, deep characters, artful cinematography. No, now it's a mindless pursuit of a self-destructive narrative and a checklist of pre-approved boxes. This shift is precisely why I didn't even bother to watch Secret Invasion. I didn't watch Loki Season 2 even though I really liked the first, and I didn't watch The Marvels. I've practically slammed the brakes on anything Disney spews out entirely, unless everyone around me tells me that the new Disney show or movie is amazing and I must watch it, like Andor. Other than that, I'm just not going to bother anymore. It's a sad state when I've reached the point of not bothering with Disney's offerings unless the collective consensus demands it. But, oh well.
I'm very thrilled about the project because I think what we are about to create is something very special. And we're in 2024 now. And I think it's about time that we had a woman come forward to shape the story in a galaxy far, far away.
When you find yourself having to emphasize specific demographics to shape a narrative, it's a glaring sign of an agenda at play. If you have to point out that a specific sex, color, race, age, sexual preference needs to shape the narrative, odds are that you have an agenda. And let's be real, it never pans out well, especially for something as expansive as Star Wars. In a film that takes place in a galaxy far, far away where race and gender should be the least of our concerns, hammering in identity labels seems downright out of place. If the only thing you think is important or interesting about yourself are all those identity labels, then it screams, I am boring because this is the only thing I can talk about. It's about time a woman shaped Star Wars films. Last I checked, Kathleen Kennedy was a woman. I thought Kathleen Kennedy already did this. I mean, she's been steering this ship for a while now. Which part of her womanhood who shaped a Star Wars film disqualifies her from that? It's a bit perplexing, considering the majority of Lucasfilm's top brass are women, and 5 out of 6 of the Disney's films are led by women. Disney Star Wars might as well be the most woman-led big-budget franchise ever. Let's not forget the plethora of fantastic, strong female characters in Star Wars who've shaped and influenced stories in the franchise. Padme, Princess Leia, Ashoka, Jyn Erso, Mon Mothma, Shakti, Asajj Ventress, Bo-Katan, the list goes on, and not forgetting the famous girl boss Mary Sue, that is Rey. But if the focus of this film is pushing an agenda rather than crafting a compelling Star Wars tale, then it's bound to be a dud. Movies with an agenda? They never hit the mark. Ask Elizabeth Banks. Oh, and by the way, for those who do not know, this is the fresh face at the helm of Star Wars, a female director. Yeah, not your run-of-the-mill director, mind you. It's crucial that you emphasize the female or the female of color part, apparently. Because in this era of importance, it's not merely about guiding Star Wars, it's about making sure we highlight the chromosomes in charge, as if that somehow qualifies someone for space opera greatness. Better grab your Jedi robes because apparently the Force is strong with the need for gender distinctions in directorial credits. Our leading lady is Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, a feminist activist hired by another feminist activist. And guess what? They're on a mission. And it's not just to bring balance to the Force. Now Sharmeen, bless her heart, is a Pakistani-Canadian journalist, filmmaker, and activist known for her work in films that highlight gender inequality against women. Admirable, sure, but let's not kid ourselves. She's got about as much experience in blockbuster space sci-fi as a porg has in a pod race. A woman who has never made a single movie other than some documentaries, whose wiki lists her as a journalist and activist, and whose only relevant experience is directing the 2 lowest-rated episodes of Ms. Marvel. Outside of those 2 decently directed episodes of Ms. Marvel, a TV show no one cares about, what has she done in the cinema space that would lead anyone to believe she can direct a big-budget space sci-fi movie? Directing a $200 million heavy CGI space sci-fi movie is vastly different than directing documentaries. While not to diminish her work so far, hell, she has 2 Oscars in her name. However, when it comes to Star Wars, I can't help but think there are better options out there. Her most notable work is her work with documentaries, which is a completely different beast than a Star Wars film. Her expertise lies in documentaries, not in navigating the galactic roller coaster of lightsabers and space battles. May the Force be with her, but I've got a bad feeling about this one. I'm not trying to knock her hustle or anything. My concern is that nothing in her body of work tells me that she is ready to helm something of the sheer magnitude of a Star Wars film. Her resume doesn't scream, ready for a mega Star Wars film. It's like handing a lightsaber to someone who's only ever dueled with glow sticks. Which begs the question, why her? Why not someone else, like asking Gareth Edwards to come back? And if having a woman director is important to them, why not hire women who have been heavily involved in film production within this franchise? Why not someone like Bryce Dallas Howard, Susanna White, or Deborah Chow, who already have hands-on experience with this franchise? Women who have directed Star Wars TV episodes to helm this. This is why the casting of Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy reeks of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, box-ticking. There are just many other better choices to helm this project, but no. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has gone wild. It's as if they had a checklist and thought, hey, we need a Pakistani-Canadian feminist activist who directed Ms. Marvel's lowest-rated episodes, and they were all like, perfect, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, forget expertise or hands-on experience. It's probably more likely that Sharmeen and Kathleen Kennedy are online BFFs, and she waltzed in with a highlight reel that made the producers go, sure, why not? It's just Star Wars. I'm starting to believe that getting a gig in Hollywood is just about having the right Twitter followers and a decent show reel. That's probably the same way she got to direct this. And does our director here even know the ins and outs of the Star Wars franchise? Or is she just scrolling through the last sequel trilogy as her crash course? Is there more to her than a list of trendy identities and Instagram reposts? What's the vision? Any unique ideas? Which characters grabbed her attention and why? And why are they bringing back Rey? Well, slap my womp rat and call me a Sith Lord. This is bound to be fantastic. Why are they making another Rey movie? We had 3 Anakin films, 3 Luke films, and we've already been served 3 courses of Rey, and they weren't exactly a banquet. Those 3 Rey movies sucked. Why is she coming back? At this point, just give me Andor Season 2 instead of flogging a dead horse with anything sequel-related. It's really hard to get excited about a movie with a rush, poorly written character making a comeback who had 3 films to be developed into something everlasting and substantial, and ultimately ended up being Palp's granddaughter and never really struggled or learned how to do anything until Episode 9, where they had to retcon Episode 7 and 8 and go, look, see, she trained with Leia. except we were never hinted at or showed Leia ever had any training until they retconned her in Episode 9 again and said, "See, Luke trained Leia. Problem solved." I'm sorry, but the Rey sequel trilogy not only destroyed the OT characters, but it also butchered what could have been an iconic Star Wars lead. She barely has character development throughout the 3 films about her, and it is a disappointment of a character that could have been a great female lead. Instead, we got a whiny, edgy protagonist handed everything on a silver platter. Star Wars should be put to sleep for a while and find a way to move past the Skywalker family. The Star Wars family legacy is already mangled beyond recognition, but it's not too late to take a step back. Let it rest and find a new approach. With statements like this, "It's about time a woman shaped Star Wars films," it's like they really believe that women are going to flood the cinemas for this film. People apparently don't understand that Star Wars appeals more to boys than to girls, same way Barbie appeals to girls mostly, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for some reason, we're stuck pretending otherwise, as if acknowledging natural inclinations is a crime. And they still focus the movies that were known to be for 80s and 90s weird male nerds in a way to get a female audience. But when they fail to do so, then they blame the men for not showing up. Honestly, it's like Disney said, "Okay, we have 2 major properties that have a male skew demographic, Marvel and Star Wars. Step 1, screw those guys. Let's shift our entire focus to pulling in the female demographic." And they did, except women largely just didn't care. They're not showing up for the content that was created for them. It's like Disney decided to pivot the whole ship, except women were like, "Thanks, but no thanks." The Kardashians are still raking in billions, and there's still a dozen Bachelor shows, so it's not like women aren't a demographic that funnels a ton of money into media. They just, as a general demographic, have different interests. Obviously, there's female Star Wars and Marvel fans, and there's lots of them. There are many very, very successful billion-dollar media franchises anchored to a mostly female demographic in TV, movies, and music. But oh well, I guess we know what she's going to say if the movie ends up tanking at the box office. You can bet the blame game will be in full swing. Reminds me of Elizabeth Banks saying her Charlie's Angels was by women, for women, then started blaming men for not seeing it when it bombed at the box office. Better rest up, people. It's gonna be our fault when this flick belly flops. May the blame be with you all. Now, the twists and turns in the saga of our filmmaker. So, there's this hullabaloo about something she said years ago, about enjoying making men uncomfortable. Social media circus, being its usual self, went berserk. But hold on to your lightsabers, folks, mind you, this was nearly a decade ago during an interview, back when she was knee-deep in her documentary about the unjust treatment of women in her home country. Now, whether or not that's going to be related to this new Star Wars film is a different tale, but here's the kicker. She's spent her career focusing on how horrible men can be, and now she's handed the reins for a franchise mostly cherished by men. Naturally, it's like waving a red lightsaber in front of a wampa. She's bound to infuse whatever she touches with a dose of social justice activism. And let's face it, we're living in a time where the entertainment industry is drowning in social justice warriors who can't resist turning every piece of art into a pulpit. They can't just let folks enjoy a movie. There's gotta be a sermon attached. People are downright sick to death of it. When we sit down to watch a flick, we're not signing up for a political rally. We just want a thrilling 2-hour escape, not a post-theater discussion about politics. The last thing on our minds after a Star Wars film should be the state of the galaxy's political affairs. May the Force guide us through these times of entertainment unrest. All right, before we end this, hold on to your Millennium Falcon, because we're about to navigate through the treacherous territory of global issues and woke activism. Women are getting a raw deal in many parts of the world, Pakistan being one of those places. It's a downright disgusting problem globally that stinks worse than a sarlacc pit. Addressing these issues is very crucial everywhere. But dropping more woke activists into a film franchise that's already critically injured and on life support? That's like trying to fix a starship with duct tape. In the Western world, women are doing pretty well. Not saying it's a utopia, but it's light years ahead of some other regions. Now, brace yourself. Here comes the kicker. The Star Wars universe doesn't need another dose of finger-wagging feminism. It needs some good old-fashioned storytelling. We're not here for a lecture on social justice. We're here for epic space battles and lightsaber duels. Let's be crystal clear. Women are fantastic, and they deserve their own stories, not just a recycled version of guys. Some women have been rocking the entertainment industry for ages, quietly kicking ass without the need for a neon sign, and many of us have seen and witnessed their craft and work for years, and I don't know why Hollywood pretends as if these women never existed. It's like they've been stealthy Jedi, quietly mastering their craft without the need for a grand announcement. So, let's refocus on the storytelling, not another round of woke shenanigans and finger-wagging. May the Force guide us back to the essence of Star Wars, epic tales from a galaxy far, far away. So, let's toss a bone to this woman and humor the idea that there's maybe a chance she might pull off some cinematic magic and might turn things around. But given her past exploits and her track record, it's hard to muster much hope. Maybe lightning will strike, but considering Ms. Marvel was like watching paint dry, color me skeptical, and now we're expected to believe this Star Wars venture will be a cinematic revelation? But we'll see. Wake me up when the trailer for this movie shows up. Can't wait to see how it unfolds. It's likely to make the Marvels look like a masterclass in filmmaking. Until then, I'll open my eyes when the Force decides to grace us with something worth staying awake for.